I'd like to call the first meeting of the Whitman Middle School Feasibility Study Building Committee meeting order. 5:30, we're at Whitman Middle School. This meeting is being held fully remotely in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts March 12, 2020 orders suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. General Law Section C 30A, Section 20. This meeting will now be live broadcast. It is not live broadcast. Its recording will be posted on YouTube tomorrow. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So our first order of business is actually to do some introductions because there are some folks in the group that don't know each other. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Jeff Steinbeck. I'm the Superintendent of Schools.
I'm Michelle Lindbergh. I'm taking the meeting minutes.
Joyce Farrow, Assistant Superintendent.
Randy Ronavina, Selectman.
John Galvin, Whitman Finance Committee.
Bernie Salmon, Facility Manager, Whitman Hanson.
Dave Padero, Finance Committee and Buildings, Facilities, and Expenditures Committee.
John Nesson, Building Facility, Capital Expenditure, and Asset Management Committee.
Bob Curran, Building Commissioner.
Hi, I'm Ms. Green. I'm currently the interim town administrator for the town of Whitman. I'm also the MCPO for the committee.
Rich Halkinen, Town Resident.
Crystal Regan, I teach 8th grade science at Whitman Middle.
Carrie Sandler, I'm the interim principal at Whitman Middle.
John Duffy, I'm the business manager at Whitman Hanson.
Chris Scriven, Vice Chair, School Committee.
And Melody School Committee.
Fred Small, School Committee.
Thank you. And if before you leave today, Michelle, did you get everybody's little?
Yeah.
Never mind. If you see at your desk, just in case we are 6 feet away, we try to socially distance, but we are also doing contact tracing in the instance that something happens. So every desk that you have has a number on it on the front, number and a letter, and Michelle has that just in case we're being precautionary in the age of COVID. So I'd just like to welcome everybody here. I think this is an exciting time for the town of Whitman. Most of you have seen this building, have walked through this building. This is one of the few rooms that we're able to get everybody in, but this building is in definite need of some 21st century upgrade, and I think we have a great opportunity here to look forward for the town, for our regional school district, and for the students and the parents of Whitman. So thank you for volunteering to be on this committee. I think we have a good, diverse group of people who are committed to seeing this process forward. Our first order of business really is to structure this committee. And in that structure, we need a chairperson and a vice chairperson. So I'm looking for a motion or nomination for chairperson of this building committee.
I'd like to nominate Dan Cullity.
I would nominate Fred Small.
Okay, a second on Dan? Yeah.
Who said that?
Chris Scriven for Dan.
John Galvin.
Any other nominations for chair of the committee? Discussion on Dan or Fred? Hearing none. So, Michelle, vote on either or?
So you need a second for each nomination and then vote on each nomination.
Okay. So on Dan's motion, or on Chris's motion for Dan, is there a second?
I'll second.
On Fred, with Galvin's motion for Fred, is there a second? Fred. Seconded by Randy. So is it a majority vote, Michelle, on this?
Yep.
Okay. All in favor of Dan Cullity for chair of the committee, please raise your hand. I can't see Mr. Curran. 4. All in favor of Fred for chairperson? I have 1, 2, sorry. I'm working at this. So let's redo this again, I'm sorry. So all in favor of Dan, please raise your hand. Five. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. We're going to 6. All opposed? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opposed is 5, Michelle. All abstaining. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5, 5, and 5. All in favor of Fred Small? Please vote. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7, 4. All opposed? 1, 2. Abstaining? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What do we have?
First of all,
Okay, congratulations, Brother Chair.
Thank you. And going down the agenda, thank you everyone. First of all, thank everybody for their participation. Hopefully this will be a good fun project. The last one we had was the high school and that was pretty good and fun.
Point of order, do we need to nominate a vice chair?
I'll accept nominations for vice chair.
Nominate Dan Coley.
I'll second that.
Chris Ribbon?
Yes. Chris nominated Dan, seconded by Mr. Galvin.
I'll nominate Mr. Galvin.
Mr. Small nominates Mr. Galvin.
Thank you for that decline. David Earl, second.
Dave, did you second that?
Yeah.
Dave seconded that.
Mr. Galvin has declined.
Galvin has the phone.
We'll withdraw that. Not seeing any other nominations.
I'll nominate Randy Lamartine.
Mr. Cudero nominates Mr. Lomacina,
I'll second that.
seconded by Mr. Small.
And hearing no other nominations, nominations are now closed. Move to the vote. All in favor of Mr. Cullity for vice chair, please raise your hand. We have 5. Correct, I now see. Is that 6? John.
You got third?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6, Rich Pope, it's 6. Yep.
Okay. All opposed? 1. And abstaining.
Trustee 8? Correct?
Yes.
And all those in favor of Mr. Lamatina?
I need a number.
5.
5?
Left. We don't need to do anything else.
I didn't get a number.
We have 5 in favor.
Yep.
It doesn't matter opposed or abstaining. Goes to Mr. Colley. Yeah? Congratulations. Okay. Review of documentation that was submitted to MSBA. Did everyone get a link from Michelle and were they able to download and review the information? go page by page.
Should be ready.
Okay, so we start off, we turned in the building assessment, correct?
Yes.
We can start off, does everyone have a copy, have it electronically?
Yeah, all right. Can you speak to what we've submitted so far?
I can. So with the SOI, does everybody have a copy of that? We submitted some background information with the SOI to MSBA. And in great detail, there's a lot of history of the issues that were happening here at Whitman Middle. And I think the way in fact I know this, the way the MSBA had structured their application is to kind of hit on all the hot spots, the building issues, your education problems with outfit in the building, the current building that you have, educationally. We've identified all of those. I think one of the caveats, and it was a freebie for us, that we submitted, it was a report done for us by some guys from Wentworth who are graduating, and it was almost like a project for them, three people. One of them was a Whitman resident that came in here and actually did a pretty good job identifying some of the shortcomings of this building, and in real time. And they saw how this building was not able to, as far as operation, not able to keep up with the standards that are out there. So for the most part, the documentation that we submitted and we reviewed with MSBA, and when they showed up on site here, some of the bullet items that this group from Wentworth identified, actually in real time, because when they showed up in the day that the students were here, the teachers were here, and they were able to see for themselves some of the things that are wrong with this building. And Jeff can get into where we came into on the list, but for the most part, our documentation is detailed. The information that we gave them kind of came out of a file that we had in my office from all of the issues that we deal with, whether it's they call it a DENS deck in the gymnasium, and I'm not going to get into great detail and shut me off when you had so much information, but it's an acoustical deck in the gymnasium. It's a metal deck with glass holes in it. Back in the 70s, they put insulation in there, and that was the acoustic absorption for the gymnasium, because you had sound in the gym bouncing off a metal deck, and the insulation would absorb that. Since then, we've had three roofs put on top of that, or two roofs put on top of that gymnasium roof. And I think the explanation that we put it in our application to MSBA, it was like a grilled cheese sandwich. And why I explain this is the first insulation that is there was like a cardboard insulation, and two roofs after that were put in there, and it squeezed that cardboard, but the leaks that were there pushed that moisture down below into the gymnasium, and it started to create mold and mildew. So identifying that, we had it tested, and I had a company come out and look at that in 2016, 2015, Simpson Gumbet, and they evaluated it, and they looked at it, and they said, yeah, you got some serious problems here. We did test cores, and the company that did the test core normally shows up with on any roof, it's 2-inch of built-up roof. So for the maximum they usually have is 4 inches. Ours is almost 8 inches of insulation. So all of that has been documented. I illustrate that to you because part of our issue is there are things that were done in this building that were supervised by the SBA, the old funding for school buildings, and they called it School Building Assistance, or Funding Bureau. And they gave the town of Whitman some money to do some renovations at all 3 schools. So I think when we explained out what we were going through, they said, well, this can't be possible, until they came out here and they visited. So all the documentation we submitted to them seems like a fictitious story that we were telling. Can't be true. Windows that are installed upside down, moisture coming through a gymnasium roof deck, things that weren't properly taken care of, insulation that is still asbestos. In 2020, we still have asbestos in the Whitman Middle School, something that should have been removed, back when they did the major renovation here. That should have been the watermark when they said all the things we need to do here, not paint and paper and new fixtures and new ceiling. We need to get the asbestos out of the building. It didn't happen. So when they say to us, they go, this can't be true, we have to come out and see it. It is true. And once they experience what we had, I think once they came on site here, they were convinced. When they left here, they were convinced that something was really messed up here. Because the way I looked at it, and it's the way I explained it to, in the story that we told me, I think it's when Crystal and I sat down in that conference room over in technology to try and tell that story about the Whitman Middle School, it's all backed up by documentation. And that's the important thing, because they got to see the documentation. And again, the story we told sounds like something crazy, but it's factual. So if you scroll through the SOI, there is documentation, and the story we tell is followed up by documentation, and we'll start to dig into that more and more as we go on. Right, Jeff?
That's very good. So I just want to elaborate too. So the process that Ernie put together was a conversation that when George and I became central office administrators to look at putting forth a building project for the Whitman Middle School. George lived in this building for 15 years, and we, in leadership team meetings, we would hear about the deficiencies of Whitman Middle, and from the building perspective and from the academic perspective. So when Ernie put together the SOI, we did have the team do a hands-on from MSBA. They were really impressed, one, with the upkeep of the facility by the facilities department, and even the commitment of Whitman to try to bandage this building. A lot of hands-on conversations, and they were able to see the deficiencies within the building. And then we were invited up to Boston when we were awarded a feasibility study by the MSBA. It was our first time in submitting, and it's rare for an MSBA to come forward and give a project or the opportunity for a project to a community their first time around. I think we were the only ones there. Out of the 20 some odd folks that got projects across the Commonwealth, we were the only ones that had done this the first time. So I want to commend the team that put together this feasibility study, or the SOI, because it was really well done. And it was truthful and factual, and when folks came in, they saw what was written there, and they could confirm that. So I think, again, we have a great opportunity to put something in front of the community for a new or a modification or a renovation of a middle school.
And not for nothing, Ernie, but how many pages was the submittal?
I think 11. Just the SOI itself was 24 pages with the signature, plus there were votes. There's a process you got to go through. You can't miss a beat, and they give you a strict, and that's why we're together as a group, because there's warrant that we get together as a group. There's votes that we'll take. There's advertisements that we'll make. There's reviews that we'll do, but everything is documented. All T's across, all I's dotted, and that's why it's so important when Jeff and George and I sat down and we're trying to figure out what's the next step that we go, and obviously meeting together. But for me, I've seen so many mistakes down the road, but to have a recording secretary is so important, and I said that to them. And because they'll ask for records going back, they'll say to us, what was the vote, what was the information that you gathered, what investigation do you do? And having somebody record that for us, it can't be any of us. It has to be somebody that's going to look at this and say, okay, this is what they said, this is what I'm documenting. So that's very important. So when you look at the SOI itself, Fred, on top of all the votes that were taken between the town and the school committees, it's above 30 plus documents. Plus we added a whole boatload of other backup information to them that they have. So as we struggle through this, or as we go through this, there'll be some highs and lows. They're gonna be there, and they're gonna be supporting us all the way, because we submitted to them all that information that they really requested in the documentation.
And, you know, the one thing I want to just bring up too, the charge of this committee, you know, I was walking out the door, my wife's like, oh, so we're building a new middle school. And I said, no, it's not necessarily the case. This is a feasibility study committee, / building committee, that the first thing would be to determine what the needs are, and they will tell us what they feel is the most cost-effective long-term solution for the town of Whitman through MSBA. So that's why they're putting their money up and matching up with reimbursement for the feasibility study that we authorized at our annual town meeting. But, you know, there's no preconception. Everything, the I's dotted, T's crossed, and we'll have a timeline. And I believe, and Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, the next thing we need to discuss is, you know, architecture and who's going to be doing the evaluation along with Ernie, so that it's an independent third party that comes in. So if you could go over the timeline a little bit, Jeff?
Sure. So,
You know, right better than I
so
do.
right now, in your packet, you see what the timeline has been. We submitted everything in July that we needed to. We submitted this committee in July, on July 31st. Our ed profile was due August 31st, 2020. That was submitted. Our online enrollment projection was submitted in August. The next thing we have to do is our enrollment certification executed, and the maintenance capital information in November. So Ernie, if you want to speak to that a little bit about that, what Fred just asked about the maintenance capital planning information.
Yeah, so what they're gonna request, and this comes really easy because we did it with the McQuan project, is they'll ask for which was amazing, it just blew my mind. We spent a boatload of money over at in Hanson at the McQuan school. We didn't realize how much money we spent out of our operating budget until we started to take all the old purchase orders. So we did that, and we came back with over $300,000 of the expenses in the last 10 years that we spent out of our operating and capital budget. So what they're going to want from us is a detailed list of maintenance requests, maintenance work orders, maintenance expenses that we've done probably in the last 5 to 6 years. And given that quick overview, just to kill the mold in the gymnasium here 4 years ago cost the town of Whitman $35,000. We killed the mold that developed in there. So a lot of those things are out there. We know what those costs are. So we'll develop a list of what it really costs us to run this building, what the maintenance issues are, what those maintenance costs are, and we'll put that. That's really the next major step for us. And in the meantime, the OPM, which will have to do a request for qualifications, we'll have to put that up. We'll have to start putting that specification together. So we'll be busy. A lot of this stuff will happen with emails as far as looking at documentation. But our next big step is getting that maintenance documentation together and sending that off to them.
And that's due by November 27th.
Correct.
So a couple of, I just think that as we sit here as humans on this committee, we come to this committee with very different parts. So some of us come to this committee as former students, some of us come to this committee as parents, some of us come to this committee as people who live in town, some of us are on this committee as teachers here. I think when we read through this, I think it's very important, if you have questions, when you have to move from the documents. So, if anybody wants to come through and see some of these things for themselves, like if you've never seen the electrical panel unit that looks like it's something out of the Batcave, I mean, you should look at that. If there's something that you want to see in the springtime, especially Crystal Regan's old room, when things are in bloom of an insect nature that cannot be stopped, you should see that. You should get to know this building as much as you can outside of the way that you currently know it, and then think about what's next. Because when we put in the educational plan for this, buildings are different now than they were. This is my third building project I've been a part of in different towns, in different school systems, but they're very different. And I think if we get a good grasp in the human world of what is this building like, and then what are its needs, and then what are the needs in the future from an educational standpoint, then we'll be better informed as we talk to people throughout the town. You know, so I think that's one of the things we might want to do. If anybody ever wants a tour, I can take you and go from there.
Well, actually, I think it's a great point. And 1.5 seconds, John? It's a great point. I think we should schedule a tour for sometime in January, February, so that, you know, everyone can have the benefit of the little tours that Ernie gives us on school committee, number one. Number two, if you could arrange somehow, and I don't know if it's possible in the COVID world, hopefully it is, a more modern middle school that, you know, once we get moving, we're going to want to tour something of that nature and see what others are doing. I look at the middle school and I look at our high school and say, geez, why can't we just have a smaller version? There may be things that are appropriate, there may be things that aren't appropriate for that. So I think it would be good for the community to be able to see everything. Now, I'm sorry, Mr. Galvin?
Yeah, no problem. In our packet is a 56-page building assessment. When was that done, and does that outline pretty much a lot of the issues here, or what was?
You're referring to the Wentworth study?
What's that?
You're referring to the Wentworth study, John?
Is that what this is?
Yeah, so that was done in 2000.
That's the Wentworth.
Yeah, and that, if you read through that, that was an exhaustive study that really led us on the path to say, where's the next phase? You know, some of the things that from memory that we lived were, you know, the fire blocking in the walls. A lot of the things they talked about where this school was built, I believe, for 420, and then we tried to convert it all to 220, and in some areas that never happened, in some areas that never worked well. So there were many different things that took place in that study, aside from just the roof and aside from the gym floor. But I think it's one of those things that as we, you know, as we move on from tonight, we look at that study from Wentworth, we look at the SOI, and then you look at the 11 pages that are pieces here, and then we look into, so what does all of that information in print look like out in the regular world, because kids still come into this school, by half of them during this time, on a daily basis. So I think that the more informed we are, the more informed everyone else can be as we go out and we try to say, what is the use of this building, whether renovated or new, 20 years from now? What's the imprint we need to leave? What's the mark we need to leave from an educational standpoint and from a community standpoint? Because let's face it, this school is the communal outreach post for basically everyone in Whitman. You arrive at the high school, sort of, but you live your sports life, you live your music life, you live your student activity life a lot through this middle school. So I think that's important as we look to see what do the kids of Whitman need in the future. I think, Chris, did I cut you off?
No, not at all. I just had the same suggestion as Fred. I was hoping we could do a walkthrough.
I think that would be very beneficial, and we can work on the time frame. It looks like we have the luxury of a little bit of time for, you know, even if school's open, maybe if we did it once the school's been deep cleaned and over a holiday week or something, that providing people are available. I don't know what people's feeling of that. The next milestone, local vote authorization, don't we already got that?
Yeah, we think that was down there.
So we're all set with that. and then the feasibility study agreement itself. But who's going to be writing up the specs in conjunction with the MSBA for an owner's project manager that Ernie was referring to?
I think between myself and John Tuffy, he's got many buildings behind him. We'd sit down and review boilerplate information. And then I think the good part of this whole MSBA, I'm sorry, John, sorry for volunteering. The whole part of this MSBA group that's in Boston is you can ask them any questions, send them anything, and they'll review it with you. The legal team will review it and say, yes, it's good, no, it's not good. There are boilerplate specs out there. And you know, it's unfortunate, but I look at things a little bit differently than they do. I would think that you would want to get the architect on before the owner's project manager. But what they want is they want somebody, an owner's project manager, to protect their investment. And so that's why they really want the owner's project manager bid before the designer. So in concept, we would have somebody here that does this, that's approved by MSBA, that would be here guiding us through the next phase, which is the most important part, is picking the right designer to give us the best bang for our buck, the most updated information, the best that Massachusetts has to offer out there. So that's kind of why they flip-flop it. For me, I would like to have the designer on before, but I think they're looking at it as being the fox guard in the hen house, so they really want somebody other than the designer stopping us out on the right foot. So that's a very important part, and John Tuffy and I, and obviously George and Jeff will sit down and come up with a very good specification, and obviously all of us will review it and then give the green light on it, and we'll do the advertisement.
So we're looking at those specs for November or December?
I would say December into January, Fred. And then, that process, what we'll go through, it'll be actually by a little bit different than the way buildings are going to be built or bid. We'll look at qualifications before we look at price. We'll review their qualifications. And you're right, Fred. One of the big things for us is we know what walks through the front door first day of school. We know the teachers and the students that are here. But there's so many different buildings out there. There's so many different ways of educating kids. And maybe we want to look at part of that. So while we're putting the specification for the owner's project manager and the facilities plan that we can get to the state, we can stop to think about that schools that are out there that, geez, they caught my eye. I read it in the paper, or I read it in Architectural Digest that there's a building out there that has good concepts. And it's always good to just look at these buildings from an open mind, because you don't want to have an architect saying, oh, look at my building, and then they convince you, yeah, this is the greatest thing ever. We want to look at buildings that a bunch of people design, and then come up with a designer that we feel comfortable with. So it's kind of reverse osmosis. But it's really, it's a lot of effort, it's a lot of time out of your private life to go and take a trip somewhere and schedule something and walk through and then look at all the qualities that they have and look at all the deficits and say, we want to support the qualities and leave the other ones behind.
Okay.
All right?
Anybody have any other questions on that portion of the process? Seeing none, we've pretty much covered the invite, etc. And the status of the submission of the MCP, or the Maintenance Capital Planning. We pretty much covered that. That'll be ready for November. The feasibility study budget, Exhibit A, which shows a date on our agenda of 10/23, but I believe that was revised.
It's due with October 23rd. So it came up a month. She had said it was due in September, but it's actually October 23rd.
Okay, it was September original,
So if you want
on the form.
just check this out. That's what we're looking at.
Does everyone have a copy?
No.
Okay. So what we're looking at for a tentative budget, owner's project manager, $226,800. Designer basic services for the feasibility study, $295,000. For the full schematic design phase, $245,000. For total basic services, $540,000. We do have some environmental and site testing that's not included. Geotech evaluation, hazardous materials inspection services, environmental site assessment, wetlands delineation, and soils characterization for a total of $34,200. And then other would be phase 1 site surveyor, $32,500, and phase 1 traffic study for $16,500 for a total of $49,000. So the total feasibility study and schematic design, $850,000, which just happens to be exactly the amount that we have approved at town meeting. And these numbers came from,
So what I'm sorry.
No, that,
So what we've been looking at is if you go onto MSBA's site, you look at projects that have been approved, and we kind of backtracked on those and see what those costs were. So pretty much it's in our original proposal, pretty much we had a good handle on what the cost would be. Historical data or historical projects that were out there, it's all public record. A building, this is 107,000 square feet. What does a building that's 100,000, 107,000 square feet cost out there to design and have a project manager? That's basically the numbers that we come up with.
does everyone feel comfortable?
Chris, you said we do have a copy of what you just read off?
No, you don't.
I'll get that.
Okay,
So I'll get that copy.
Thank you.
We'll have that tomorrow. Email to everyone?
Once we submit to that. I'll
Okay.
get it out there with the minutes of this.
Okay.
Right, that's what,
Yeah, the copies that we have applying.
Mhm.
Any other questions on that portion of the submittal?
Fred, I got a question.
Go ahead.
Ernie, who are you gonna recommend, or do you have a list of owners reps that you'd like to use, or do you have a list from the MSBA?
They do have a list, and they have to be pre-approved to bid.
So do they have a qualified list of
Yeah.
X number
Yeah.
of people?
Yep. So what will end up happening, Don, is we'll put it on the street, and then we'll get a whole bunch we'll get them from California, Texas, and Maine, and some from Massachusetts, and it'll be our goal is to kind of sort them by what's relevant. Have they done middle schools? There's going to be qualifiers that we're going to have in the advertisement. We're looking for an OPM that has done public schools, that has done projects that have involved middle school projects. Because it's apples and oranges, a high school versus a middle school. And actually the price dictates that, because an elementary school for feasibility studies around $550,000, $600,000. A middle school is around $850,000, and a high school design is around over $1 million. So that's kind of what we're looking at. So they do have a list, and they have to be pre-qualified from the MSBA, and then we take it from there.
Anybody else? Now, will that go through our business office, or will that go through Lisa, or in conjunction with Lisa's, the name procurement officer, I take it?
Yes.
So everyone will be working together as far as getting that out to bid, so to speak. And once we get the applications in, I would assume the way we'll do it is a pre-screen, which we can look to make sure the criteria that the people that we're advertising is met, and we'll select from the candidates who we want to interview, and then we'll bring them in over a 1 or 2 night period, depending upon how many there are. We'll interview them and then vote for them. Heck, that's how we found Ernie.
Yeah.
back at high school. So, any other questions on that, Chris? Okay. Great. The agenda, notice person assigned to the district. Quick question, does that have to be a member of this committee, or is it,
Probably be in.
or can we say Michelle?
No, we should say either the superintendent or assistant superintendent.
Okay. I would entertain a motion for a notice person to be assigned to the district. Chris?
Sure.
Do I have a second? All in favor? Opposed? And abstaining? One abstention. Get that, Michelle?
Okay.
Again, I'll be able to-
And Chris Brennan seconded,
Chris,
Dan motion.
Chris motion.
Chris motion, Dan second.
I'm sorry.
Jeff got the majority vote.
Jeff is gonna be the motion?
Yeah.
He's the only one that could vote for that.
Next meeting date, as we're getting into November, but we have submissions due on the 27th, and we want to be, away from Thanksgiving and families are traveling. I don't know how, but they may. We'll be looking at for the next, is Monday evenings convenient for everybody? To be out of the way of some of the other committee meetings. And did this time frame work? 5:30?
Okay, for that.
Everybody else? Okay. So we can say we'll do 5:30. Calendar. So,
How often do you just they meet?
I'm sorry?
How often do you just they meet?
Probably when we have something doing once a month.
Yeah.
Then it'll probably quiet down a little bit, and forgive me if I'm wrong, Ernie, you can correct me. It'll quiet down to be one every 2 or 3 months, and then it'll start to heat back up where it'll be as often as twice a month.
Yep. Okay.
Does that sound about accurate?
Yeah.
All right, the 27th is the day after Thanksgiving. I'm going to assume that the 16th would be the only viable day before that. And is that too soon from now? Or would the will of the committee be to have the submittal documents emailed to them and we can discuss them in December?
I think we could email and discuss it in December.
Right, well, yeah, because we also have to meet with MSBA before that, correct?
When is that meeting, Michelle?
You're gonna get in touch with us before the end of November, so we don't know that yet.
Right.
And we don't know what's going there, if we're doing a Zoom meeting.
So what Michelle said, I don't know if everyone could hear it, but, is that we take tonight's information, we work with Jennifer Flynn at MSBA, we set a date for them to tell us the next steps in their involvement, kind of like their boilerplate pieces that Ernie mentioned. And then we officially kick it off with them in conjunction. So they haven't given us that date yet. So I'm not sure, like Fred said, we should go like the first Monday in December or something like that, and see where we're at.
I think we did tentatively schedule something, and
Yeah.
give that date to them too.
Right.
Because then we have a date already settled.
And that would be Monday, December 7th.
Get the water, right?
Okay. And wear something patriotic and pledge of allegiance will mean something a little bit additional.
And I would assume they're gonna do it by Zoom. I would assume that at this point.
And would you anticipate the entire committee being involved?
I'm not sure. We'll target that. They're gonna direct us what they want to do.
Okay, if they want a delegation
Yeah.
or just the main representative from the school. I prefer if anybody that wanted to participate could, even if it was, only to sit in the background and listen.
Absolutely.
I think that everyone should be entitled. And anybody else have anything?
So December 7th, Fred?
December 7th, 5:30.
5:30.
Michelle will email out an invitation.
Yes. And we'll also email out the documents that are due on the 27th.
Yep. Anything else to come before the committee? And entertain a motion to adjourn.
Fred, I have one
I'm sorry?
quick question. May seem like a silly question,
Yeah.
but is it the thought process that the new building is gonna go up behind here?
No,
Or is there other properties in mind?
Can't
There's a
have
lot of
any
free ball out there,
preconception right
free
now.
blood out there.
we can't have any preconceived notions right now.
Okay, so it's not necessarily guaranteed that it's gonna be built on this property?
Not even guaranteed they're gonna build a building.
Well, I understand that.
They may say, you know something, your structure's good. We'll give our money if you do a refurbishment. We're not gonna pay for a new building. And you just never know. Once we get to that point, then, there could be an awful lot considered. Heck, you could look at any property the town owns. You could look at the town said, hey, we wanted to go out and buy property. I don't imagine that being the case, but, you just don't know what's gonna happen. So we kind of have this preconceived notion. And yeah, it is pretty wet out back there.
That's what I wanted to clear up.
I think, if I may, Fred?
Yeah.
In that budget that Jeff showed you tonight, the survey is a big nut, I think $30-something thousand.
Yeah.
They're gonna tell a lot of what's here that we don't see it. They'll be able to identify, and early on, the state's gonna be like, okay, we just need to know what the layout of that property is. So that's in conjunction with anything else that the town of Whitman or Whitman School District has to offer. Because in the back of their mind, they're constantly thinking, what can we get the best bang for our buck? Is it build new, or is it renovate?
Yeah, and in the future, who knows, maybe we can end up talking about, what the water tables are and how you can lower the water tables, if you can drain the waters into a tank and have a gray water system similar to what we have in the high school. So that when you flush a toilet, you're not using any water. It's all done by water runoff, gray water. So, who knows when we get to that. But if there's nothing else, I would entertain that motion to adjourn. Motion. Randy and then Chris seconded. All in favor? No one's opposed to take it? Thank you.
Thank you.